Final Fantasy XVI may need little introduction. It is the latest mainline game in the long-running Final Fantasy franchise. First released back in 1987, 36 years ago. The series itself has given us some of the best JRPG experiences to date, with games like FF6 and FF7 usually topping people's favorite games of all time. But because of that, expectations of a FF game have long been set. With the game shifting away from its traditional turn-based roots, how does the game hold up? Is this complete gameplay shift the right choice for the new era of Final Fantasy? This is the video adaptation of our review article of Final Fantasy XVI at Game8. The link is in the description below. The game setting goes back to its medieval fantasy roots compared to Final Fantasy XV. Yep, no more cross-country road trips with the boys. The story takes place in the realm of Valisthea, a place where large mother crystals are found. The mountain-sized crystalline formations surround the environment with ether, which is the energy needed to use magic as well as being the land's life force. But this source may be in danger as a mysterious blight has been spreading throughout the land, completely draining the ether from it. This in turn causes the nations of Valisthea to start going into conflict for what remaining land there is. Enter Clive Rosfield, the firstborn son of the Archduke of Rosaria and older brother of Joshua, heir to the Duchy of Rosaria and dominant of the Phoenix, Icon of Fire.
Phoenix?
Dominants are powerful beings that can call upon the power of Icons during battle, and their very presence can make or break wars between Valisthea's nations. But the younger brother Joshua is killed by a mysterious dominant, while Clive is enslaved by the neighboring Holy Empire of Sanbreque.
You're going to be a soldier.
13 years have passed since Joshua's death, and Clive has sworn to avenge him despite still being under the thrall of the Empire. Little does he know that a chance encounter on the battlefield with a girl from his past will change his destiny forever.
No, that's not you. Not here.
The story itself is compelling, as Clive's quest for revenge causes him to unravel mysteries and find answers for the events that happened 13 years ago. It also really helps that the characters are very well rounded and believable. The first few hours of the game really does a great job of introducing us to the main cast of characters. The intro pretty much shows us all the important people of note in the game and where their allegiances lie. The game also introduces you to your soon-to-be party members, Jill and Torgal, who accompany Clive throughout his quest to find answers to his brother's death. The main story of the game is around 40 to 50 hours depending on how you play. And with the way it's presented and how compelling it is, it really makes you want to stick to the story and go along with Clive to solve the mysteries of the game.
Wait! Clive, what's that?
The dominant.
Unfortunately, there are moments in the second half of the game where it does seem to drag on a bit too long. There are even a few times where the story goes on a bit of a tangent. It makes it feel like we're just doing a random side quest.
Just this very morn, I found him with his nose buried in my nuts.
Wait, what?
In my nuts.
But even for those moments, the game does a great job of tying them into the story. We just wish that some of these were a lot less dragged out. With that being said, the game does feel like it lacks replayability story-wise. It feels like a one-and-done type of game, as you are pretty much able to complete everything in one playthrough. That's not to say that's a bad thing. The story and the gameplay are good enough that we can say that the game is still worth experiencing.
Thank you, Joshua.
And speaking of gameplay, Final Fantasy XVI embraces a full-on action RPG approach to its gameplay. Gone are the days of the usual turn-based gameplay that is usually associated with Final Fantasy games. In its place is a high-adrenaline, fast-paced combat system. Players accustomed to action games such as Devil May Cry or Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance may feel at home here. The game may just be a more simplified version of the combat of these games, but it's still very fun and responsive. It's also very smooth, allowing you to string together different combos and abilities. Throughout the game, Clive will unlock abilities to further increase your combo potential. You can unleash a flurry of wind slashes to make short work of enemies, or you can mix it up by charging through enemies using a flame ability and then finishing off the remaining foes with an AoE lightning strike. It's a blast to do. The game really gives you a lot of moves to shake up the combat. It almost makes us feel like there is an invisible DMC-like rating system, where we try to make the most absurd combo we can do. Well, unsurprisingly, the game shares the same combat director as the DMC series, which is probably why the gameplay and combat feel like a Devil May Cry game rather than a Final Fantasy game. Another one of the game's huge selling points are the very over-the-top boss fights. And by over-the-top, we really mean it. Like, this is crazy kaiju fighting levels of crazy. It's quite the spectacle to see two large entities just go at each other. And accompanying these action set pieces are everyone's favorite action game mechanic: quick time events. Okay, now, before you go say, QTEs, the game actually does a great job of implementing it by not making it appear very often. Now, all this talk of how action-focused this new Final Fantasy is may seem like a turn-off for fans expecting a more traditional Final Fantasy game. Sure, being able to do some sick battle combos is fun and all, but the game feels like a run-of-the-mill action game with a Final Fantasy coat of paint on it. Will this new Final Fantasy resonate with older fans? Maybe. The change in gameplay is quite a big jump from its turn-based roots, but this could be just the thing to breathe life into an already long-running JRPG series. We honestly enjoyed the shift to a more action-focused Final Fantasy, but it is understandable why older fans may be a bit more cautious or may not like this recent change in the series. Only time will tell whether this formula is the one Final Fantasy will stick to in the future. After all, they changed the formula they had from Final Fantasy 15. Compared to the openness of FF15, Final Fantasy 16 chooses a more linear approach to both its story and its gameplay. This makes for a more purposely designed experience from the developers, but it strips away a bit of the autonomy and freedom we used to have. Character progression is also very streamlined, as you don't have to worry about managing any other party members except for Clive. Yep, you can only really control Clive in the entire game. With the exception of your trusty wolf Torgal, who you can command to attack by pressing the D-pad, the rest of your party is AI controlled. You can switch up Clive's abilities and powers, but the game just limits you to just that one playable character. As for the side quests, in between all the huge story moments, you can take up a few side adventures. Most of them, not counting the ones that give you upgrades, feel very pointless, to say the least. The side quests aren't really that notable and feel like your usual RPG filler quests.
The task is simple enough. Pass through the gate and deliver packages to a few of my most valued clients.
Even midway through the game, some of the side quests feel like tasks you would get in the early hours of the game.
Is everything alright?
Oh, yeah, it's just, well, as you know, we've been trying to grow fruit down here. I thought this first harvest could go to the curse breakers, on account of all they do for the hideaway. You couldn't take them some, could you? Seems better them coming from you.
Despite that, you'll still have a blast playing through the game. The main story is still great, and the gameplay is also very well made and very responsive. Just being able to pull off some sick looking combos is enough reason for us to keep playing. Where this game truly shines is in its visuals. The well designed characters, the beautiful large areas. The game is quite breathtaking to behold. From the large open plains of the Holy Empire of Sanbreque to the marshes of the Grand Duchy of Rosaria, the game's environment is always a sight to see. This extends to the combat too. Every combat looks stunning and deadly due to the visual combat effects. The fire abilities look very explosive and you can really feel the density of certain ground abilities. All that paired with some excellent visuals and lighting, it honestly makes every ability quite a sight to behold. Even during the combat set pieces, the game's visuals don't let up. You will be left speechless at the stunning graphics on display here. The visuals of this game really pushes what the PS5 can do in terms of graphics. Although there are times where it may be pushing it a bit too much, as frames can drop even with the performance setting turned on in the game's option menu. The frame drops are especially noticeable in large town areas with a lot of character models and effects, but it was never so bad that it detracted from the overall experience of the game. The audio complements the visuals as it does a great job of really accompanying the impactful moments of the game. From the epic battle orchestras to the more somber moments of just exploring the world, the game's soundtrack is really one of its strong points. Even the combat sound effects sound very impactful. The sounds during combat make your abilities really feel powerful with its bass booming activation effects. It makes every hit on a foe sound very meaty and solid. The voice acting was great as well. The characters sound very believable and grounded.
You will wait outside the care and guide those I free to safety.
And miss all the fun, why can't he do that?
The performances of Clive and Sid especially get a special mention from us.
I think we're gonna need a bigger sword.
Mine's bigger.
Thank you, Clive, but I meant that figuratively.
It was their performances that really made us get attached to these characters.
If you want to leave, that's your lookout. I'm sure you'll have a long and happy life together if you stay out of my way.
Sid!
Even some of the NPCs have some really good voice work on them. Well, for the most part.
Who's buried in my nuts?
Although the combat mechanics of Final Fantasy XVI may be a huge departure from previous titles, it is still a Final Fantasy game through and through. It still shares all the things a fan of the series would love. From the interesting characters to its compelling story. It also feels like the most accessible Final Fantasy there is, as the game's combat and story are both easy to get into. We're giving Final Fantasy XVI an 8.8 out of 10. While the game may not be as groundbreaking as the older FF, it's a good step in the right direction for a new Final Fantasy. Be sure to check out the written version of this review linked in the description below. Again, this is Game Aid Information Station, signing off.